October 7, 1944. Achmer Aerodrome, northwestern Germany, was one of the most heavily defended airfields in the entire Third Reich. It was ringed by batteries of 88mm anti-aircraft guns that could shred any aircraft foolish enough to approach at low altitude. Lieutenant Urban Drew, a 21-year-old pilot from Detroit, pushed his P-51 Mustang into a screaming, high-speed dive. His aircraft, nicknamed Detroit Miss, had the distinctive yellow nose markings of the 361st Fighter Group painted clearly. Below him, Me-262 jet fighters were beginning their takeoff roll along the long concrete runway, engines screaming. Their revolutionary Junkers turbojet engines were spooling up, twin plumes of heat shimmer trailing from the exhaust nozzles as they accelerated. Drew had perhaps 30 seconds before those jets became untouchable. 30 seconds to accomplish something no pilot had ever done before. He had to destroy two-jet aircraft in a single mission while flying a propeller-driven fighter. Every briefing said it was impossible. The Me-262 could reach 540 miles per hour, over 100 miles per hour faster than the Mustang maximum speed. In level flight, in a chase, in any conventional engagement, the jet was simply uncatchable. German propaganda called it the wonder weapon. German propaganda said it would sweep Allied aircraft from the skies. But Urban Drew was not looking for a conventional engagement. He was diving at over 400 miles per hour now. The airframe shuddered as his Mustang approached its structural limits. The lead Me-262 was rolling down the runway, accelerating hard, but it was not yet moving at safe flying speed just yet. Drew opened fire at 800 yards. Tracers walked up the runway and smashed directly into the jet's right engine nacelle. The Me-262 lurched as the engine disintegrated. The crippled jet staggered into the air on one engine, barely able to fly. Drew closed the distance to 400 yards and fired again. The world's most advanced fighter rolled inverted and plunged down. It crashed into the woods and exploded massively on impact. One jet was down and one to go, and the heavy flak was getting closer. The second Me-262 pilot, Lieutenant Gerhard Kobe, RT, had witnessed his squadron mate's destruction, and he attempted to abort. But the jet's poor throttle response made rapid deceleration impossible. His aircraft was still rolling at dangerous speed. This happened just when Drew pulled out of his first attack run and immediately banked hard to position himself for a second pass. His wingman, Second Lieutenant Robert McSee, was screaming warnings about flak as 88mm shells were bursting all around them. The explosions were close enough that Drew could feel concussions through his airframe, but he ignored them and dove again. His rounds found the second jet deep in the turn, sparking violently along the fuselage and smashing into both engines. The Me-262 slowed down rapidly, then erupted in massive flames as the fuel tanks ignited instantly upon impact. Kobe RT managed to escape the burning wreck, but his aircraft was a total loss. In less than 2 minutes, Drew had accomplished the impossible. But here is where the story takes a cruel turn, because Drew's gun camera, the device that recorded combat footage to verify victories, had jammed. It had jammed during the attack, and his only witness, Second Lieutenant Robert McSee, took flak hits during their escape and was shot down. He was captured by German forces before he could file a report, so without evidence, Air Force headquarters denied Drew's victory claims. Urban Drew would not receive official recognition until 1983, nearly 40 years later, when German Luftwaffe archives confirmed what happened. A German pilot named Georg Peter Eder, who had witnessed the attack from the ground, testified that he had seen a yellow-nosed Mustang destroy both jets. The United States Air Force finally awarded Drew the Air Force Cross, recognizing his heroism nearly 40 years after the actual event took place. He remains the only Allied pilot to shoot down two jet aircraft in a single mission while flying a propeller-driven fighter in combat. But Drew's kills were not isolated incidents. They were part of a desperate campaign by American fighter pilots to neutralize the most advanced weapon. They were trying to neutralize the most advanced weapon of World War II, and it worked because they discovered the wonder weapon's fatal weakness. The Me-62 Schwalbe represented a fundamental transformation of aerial warfare. Development had begun in 1930, 8 years before the war started. By 1940, 4 test pilots reported performance that seemed to belong to science fiction. The jet could sustain speeds that were simply incredible. The jet could sustain speeds that made interception by piston-engine fighters mathematically impossible, for 30mm cannons could destroy a heavy bomber. It could destroy a heavy bomber with as few as 3 hits. Hitler himself had delayed the program by demanding bomber variants instead of fighters. That decision cost critical months. For Allied commanders, the implications were terrifying. B-17 flying fortresses lumbering through German skies were vulnerable. B-17 flying fortresses lumbering through German skies at 180 miles per hour would be helpless targets against these fast jets. If Germany deployed these jets in significant numbers, the strategic bombing campaign could face catastrophic losses. But Allied intelligence officers found what they were looking for, which were weaknesses hiding inside those revolutionary engines. The Junkers Jumo 00 for turbojet was catastrophically unreliable, unlike modern engines that use exotic nickel-based superalloys. In 1940, Germany had no access to these strategic metals because Allied bombing and naval blockades had severed supply lines. The turbine blades manufactured from substitute chroma D, your alloy degrade under the extreme stress of combat conditions. The official overhaul interval was approximately 10 hours of operation, and complete engine replacement was necessary after 25 hours. After just 3 or 4 combat sorties, Me-262s needed new engines that Germany's strained industrial base could barely produce. The fuel situation was equally devastating because the Jumo 00 burned J to synthetic fuel at twice the rate of piston engines. This fuel was produced from coal at large industrial complexes that were prime targets for Allied strategic bombing campaigns. By late 1940, many had been destroyed, and Me-62 units were frequently grounded because they simply lacked fuel. Pilots sat in ready rooms beside operational jets waiting for fuel allocations that might come once a week, or maybe not at all. Even more critical was the throttle response problem, because unlike piston engines that responded instantly, the Jumo 00 suffered from significant lag. Advancing the throttle too quickly could cause compressor stalls or engine fires, so pilots had to nurse their throttles with delicate precision. This was practically impossible during split-second combat situations, but the most exploitable weakness emerged from basic physics regarding thrust. Jet engines produce poor thrust at low airspeeds, so the Me-62 required takeoff speeds exceeding 110 miles per hour. It took nearly 30 seconds to reach flying speed, and during that time, the aircraft was completely helpless accelerating in a straight line. It was unable to maneuver or escape, so if Allied fighters could catch Me-62s during takeoff or landing, they became sitting ducks. Intelligence officers identified Me-62 to bases through photo reconnaissance, noting locations like Achmer Aerodrome and Lechfeld. They noted that jets required specialized J to synthetic fuel available only at designated facilities, so German pilots could not divert. They had to return home to their specific bases, which created the opportunity that Mustang fighters would use to ambush them. Mustang fighters would loiter near known jet bases, waiting to ambush Me-62s during their most exposed moments. The Luftwaffe recognized this vulnerability immediately, so they installed extensive flak defenses along the long approach corridors, positioning 88mm guns and 20mm automatic cannons to create lethal curtains of fire to protect them. They assigned their best piston engine fighters to provide top cover during jet operations, but the fundamental problem remained. Me-262s simply had to take off and land, and during those critical phases, they became completely defenseless targets. Captain Chuck Yeager encountered his first Me-62 on November 6, 1944 while leading a mission. He was leading a bomber escort mission when he spotted jets slashing through the formation at tremendous and terrifying speed. Then they escaped before escorts could react because standard doctrine said chasing Me-62s was completely futile. Yeager made a different calculation, realizing those jets had to land somewhere and soon because their fuel endurance was limited. He broke from the bombers and descended toward Achmer, our airfield, where he spotted a lone Me-62 below him. The jet was in the landing pattern, gear down flaps, extended speed reduced to 150 miles per hour. The German pilot was focused on his instruments, nursing fuel gauges that were rapidly approaching empty. Yeager pushed into a dive, trading altitude for velocity as the Mustang's Packard Merle and engine screamed. He built speed past 400 miles per hour, past 420, approaching 450. He closed to 400 yards and opened fire, and his .650 caliber machine guns converged. Rounds converged on the jet's left wing root and cockpit, and the Me-62 made no evasive maneuver. The pilot was probably killed or severely wounded by the initial burst as Yeager continued firing. The jet's left wing folded upward as structural members failed and the aircraft rolled, inverted, and plunged. It plunged into the woods, several hundred feet short of the runway, exploding in a ball of orange flame. Yeager had no time to celebrate because Achmer, our S-guns, opened fire immediately, so his only option was to fly fast. He had survived one of the most dangerous tactical situations in air combat, attacking a heavily defended enemy airfield in broad daylight. "First time I saw a jet, I shot it down," Yeager later said, adding, "not very sportsmanly, but what the hell," was his honest comment. Through late 1944 and into 1945, American pilots refined these tactics as the P-51 Mustang proved ideal. It was ideal because of its exceptional endurance, allowing more than 7 hours airborne with external dropped anchors attached to the wings. Pilots learned to position themselves at high altitude above jet bases, then dive vertically when Me-62s appeared below. In the dive, a P-51 could briefly exceed 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch jets during vulnerable phases of flight. They learned that German pilots, constrained by fuel limitations, could not abort landing approaches once they had committed to the runway. Once a Me-62 committed to landing with empty tanks, the pilot had no choice but to continue regardless of threats. This gave attacking Mustang pilots a crucial psychological advantage. February 25, 1945 demonstrated these tactics devastatingly. Mustangs of the 55th Fighter Group surprised an entire squadron of Me-62s at Giebelstadt Airfield during takeoff. American pilots destroyed 6 jets on the ground or during takeoff, with several more damaged, while the base was consumed by chaos and smoke. March 18, 1945 saw the last great air battle over Germany. 1,221 Allied bombers attacked Berlin. Escorted by 630 fighters, the Luftwaffe assembled 37 Me-62s, the largest jet force ever committed to a single mission. The jets carried a new weapon called R for Emin-guided rockets. Each Me-62 carried 24 rockets designed for saturation attacks. Instead of requiring precise unfire, pilots could fire salvos into bomber formations and let explosions do the killing, which was terrifying. The jets screamed through the bomber stream at over 500 miles per hour, our pilots ripple-firing rockets. Explosions blossomed among the B-17s. German pilots claimed 12 bombers destroyed, but even accepting those claims, the jets had destroyed less than 1% of the attacking force. The bombers reached Berlin, delivered their ordnance, and returned to England. The strategic bombing campaign continued unaffected despite the new weapon. As Germany collapsed in spring 1945, Adolf Galland, the legendary ace dismissed as General of Fighters, formed Jagdverband 44. It was an elite Me-62 unit composed of Germany's finest pilots, men like Heinz Baer with 220 victories. Gerhard Barkhorn with 301 victories joined them. The unit represented Germany's last hope for demonstrating what jets could accomplish under optimal conditions. Even with priority for aircraft and fuel allocations, JV-44's operational life lasted only weeks because Allied bombing forced constant relocation. Fuel shortages grounded jets for days at a time. Half the assigned aircraft were typically unserviceable, awaiting engine replacements that never arrived. By April 1945, they were operating from highway sections of the Autobahn and hiding their precious aircraft in nearby dense forests. Galland himself was wounded in one of the war's final engagements when his Me-262 was struck by American fighters during combat. He survived to write memoirs that became essential reading for aviation historians. The Me-262's combat career ended not with a decisive battle. It ended with gradual dissipation as jets were grounded by fuel shortages, destroyed on airfields, or simply abandoned as Germany collapsed completely. Post-war analysis reached a clear consensus that the Me-262 was revolutionary, that its design pioneered features that became standard. But it arrived too late. Germany lacked fuel, lacked trained pilots, lacked air superiority for safe operations, and faced overwhelming numerical disadvantage. Engineering lessons directly influenced American jet development. The P-80 Shooting Star incorporated solutions to problems identified in Me-262 analysis. It resulted in longer engine life, better throttle response, and improved reliability, which were critical factors for the next generation of jet fighters. But the deeper lesson transcended engineering. It was about strategy and human adaptability in the face of overwhelming technological superiority. The Me-262 campaign demonstrated that no weapon is invincible if determined adversaries find ways to counter its advantages effectively. The importance of exploiting enemy vulnerabilities rather than engaging strengths became embedded in fighter doctrine worldwide for decades to come. The specific tactics using altitude to build speed and timing attacks for vulnerable phases remained relevant as new superior aircraft emerged. These principles were validated in Korea, in Vietnam, and in conflicts across the Middle East, proving that tactics often outweigh raw performance. Urban drew diving on Achmer, our airfield with a jammed camera and flak exploding around him, made a choice to press his attack. Chuck Yeager, breaking from escort duty to hunt a jet he had watched escape, gambled that tactical insight would prove valuable. These were decisions made by human beings who understood that no weapon is invincible if the people fighting against it are creative. The German pilots who flew Me-262s were brave and skilled, many were aces with dozens of victories against Allied aircraft. They flew a machine that should have given them decisive advantage over any opponent, yet they still lost the war for the skies. But they faced opponents who refused to be intimidated by revolutionary technology, opponents who studied their enemy and identified weaknesses, opponents who accepted extraordinary risks and thought creatively under fire, developing tactics that transformed those weaknesses into fatal vulnerabilities. The Swallow fell from the sky and the Mustangs brought it down, proving that human courage and ingenuity are the ultimate weapons. If you want more hardcore breakdowns of history, this miscalculation smash that like button and